Donald Trump, this is the big news. He has said that, talking about NATO, so in the past he would say he wants to get rid of NATO, and many of us who are anti-war believe that that meant that, and Trump also being very war adverse, there's no doubt about that, and I don't think this changes that. When he says he wants to get rid of NATO, many of us see that as a positive sign of somebody who really truly wants to dismantle the military-industrial complex. But now he seems to clarify, and he's saying, no, we'll stay in NATO. We'll 100% stay in NATO. And in fact, we'll 100% come to a NATO allied defense as long as they pay their fair share. So for him, it just comes down to money. You got to pay your money. And then, we as paid mercenaries will come to your rescue. I mean, that's essentially what the United States has become, is our greatest export is military. And he's saying, look, if you want the advantage of our military, we're not going to give it away for free anymore. Now, from a business perspective, smart, right? From a business perspective, if your export is war, then you'd want to make sure people pay for that. So if you're Lockheed Martin, if you're Raytheon, if you're Boeing, if you're any of these companies, Boeing, by the way, in another, more incidences at Alaska Airlines, windshield cracked or something, or one of the windows or something, just another. Anyway, that's off topic. If you're one of these companies, you're not giving the weapons to the United States for free, right? If you're one of these companies, you're not just donating weaponry to various countries around the world. You're making them pay for it. That's your industry. Now, we might not agree with that industry. We might not agree. I know I certainly don't. I don't think it's a healthy, good, moral, ethical industry to be in, to be greedy when we've got a corporate setup the way that we do, where people are just looking for revenue, they're looking for profits, and their industry is missiles. And if that's their industry, they're going to want to sell as many missiles as they can, so they're going to be warmongers. So, but if that is your industry, then it would make sense for you to sell whatever it is your product is, even if your product is completely immoral. Trump then saying, well, our product as the United States is obviously the exportation of our military. We have 800 bases around the country, around the world. We are constantly being called upon to help. So if that's our number one export, then we should make people pay for it. So that is what he's saying. He's saying that if he's elected, here's the article from Fox News, former President Trump vowed that if he's elected, the United States would 100% stay a part of NATO if the alliance pays its fair share and treats America fairly. Quote, if it's not for the United States, NATO literally doesn't exist, Trump said, but they took advantage of us like most countries do. The United States should pay its fair share, not everybody else's fair share, he says. Trump told Nigel Farage that he believes the United States, quote, was paying 90% of NATO could be 100%. He said, quote, it was the most unfair thing. And don't forget, it's more important to them than it is to us. We have an ocean between some problems, okay? We have a nice, big, beautiful ocean. It's more important for them. Farage asked if NATO starts to play fair, is America there? And Trump replied, yes, 100%, 100%. So he's still big on, look, if you've got a problem, we'll come to your aid. Now, NATO is massive. Montenegro's in NATO. You got all kinds of countries in NATO that, do you really want to be able to send, let's just get the list up here, NATO countries. Do you really want to send your kids off to defend, like Montenegro, to defend Albania, to defend Estonia, to defend, North Macedonia? I mean, do you even know where these places are? Do you feel like if they're invaded, how much help are they going to be to us? These alliances are odd simply because talk about, and Trump does often talk about trade imbalance. Well, this is an alliance imbalance for sure. North Macedonia, which has a population of 2 million people, and we're going to go to their defense, but how much defense can they offer us? I mean, some of these countries, look at this country here, Iceland. Iceland's in NATO, 300,000 people are in Iceland. How much help are they going to be if the United States gets invaded? And let's face it, if we get invaded, it's going to be the United States. It's going to be U.S. troops defending the United States. It isn't going to be Icelandic troops or Montenegro troops, which has a population of 600,000, or troops from Estonia. I mean, sure, maybe they will send some, but even after 9/11, very few of these NATO states actually provided very many of the soldiers. We were providing, still as the United States, the vast majority of them after 9/11. That's the only time that Article 5 has actually been invoked. So it's an if he's going to look at it from a business perspective of, look, you just pay your fair share and then you can have the export that we provide, which is military, fine. But then he should also be looking at it from a trade imbalance. It's an alliance imbalance, and that should be taken into consideration. I don't think it's bad. Look, if you're a small country, if you're 300,000 people, you definitely would like to turn to a bigger country and say, will you help us if, this other big country comes and invades us? And so I understand that, but what are they offering? Why would you make that alliance? There would have to be some benefit there. And I guess with the United States, if we're really, trade is a big one. We obviously do a lot of trade with Europe. But anyway, the whole thing with Trump, this is just showing us that he's not looking to disband NATO. He's not going to get rid of it. He's going to keep it as long as everybody pays their fair share. And if they pay their fair share, then they can have war. We can give them our wars or our help with their wars, I should say. But there really are wars. We're the ones who pick the fights. And then, then there's that. So I guess that's another point there. Should we pay 90% to 100% of NATO? Is that fair? That actually, I think, now that we're thinking about it, I think that's more fair. I think it's fair for the United States to pay for 90 to 100% when the United States causes all the wars. So if we're causing the wars, why should Europe have to pay for them? Why should they have to pay their fair share? Isn't the fair share the United States paying? Just a thought. Let's move on here. Another disappointing point. I think this is to be expected, but remember, this is Trump's son-in-law. So many people are thinking Trump is the anti-war guy. Trump is going to get in there and he's going to solve all these problems. But here's Jared Kushner, his son, saying that Gaza has very valuable waterfront property. So maybe he says, quote, it's a little bit of an unfortunate situation there, but I think from Israel's perspective, I would do my best to move the people out, then clean it up. But I don't think that Israel has stated that they don't want the people to move back there afterwards. Of course they've stated that. He says, I don't think Israel stated they don't want the people to move back there afterwards. Yes, they have. Jared Kushner, who's really good friends with Benjamin Netanyahu. So good of friends that when Benjamin Netanyahu would come to town, he would stay at the Kushner's home. In Jared Kushner's childhood, he would have to give up his bedroom and he'd go sleep on the couch in the living room, and Benjamin Netanyahu would get Jared Kushner. So they're close. They're close friends. Family is very close to Benjamin Netanyahu. And here's Jared Kushner, playing the good Zionist role. Now, Jared Kushner is saying, "Oh, you took my comments out of context." He's complaining about that. But look, I mean, you can't even get it straight by saying you think that Israel that they haven't even said they don't want the people to move back there afterwards. Israel's made that very clear that they want to deport all of these people into Egypt or into Lebanon or all around, or humanitarian islands is the latest thing that they've been saying. But he goes on to say that, he says the thing that everybody says, all of the Zionist Israelis say. They say the same thing, which is, oh, look, you guys had all this money. Hamas had all this money, and Hamas could have been using that money to build nice waterfront property in Gaza, but instead they built tunnels. Instead, that's what they did with their money. Well, they couldn't build nice waterfront properties because Israel controls all of the imports and exports for all of Palestine. So Israel will not allow building materials into Gaza. Israel doesn't allow electricity into Gaza except for a few hours a day. Israel has hindered and not only in Gaza where there's Hamas, but they do this in the West Bank as well. This isn't, because Hamas. They do this to the Palestinian people. They do this even in the West Bank. In the West Bank, they also don't allow for businesses to pop up that are going to compete with Israeli businesses. So if they see that there's a business that would be heavy on the exports, but they've got an Israeli company that has those same exact exports, they actually shut that Palestinian company down. They are extremely controlling of everything that goes in, everything that goes out. They have forced the Palestinians to become import dependent, which is an awful thing to be. You want to be dependent on yourself. They don't allow the Palestinians to be dependent on themselves. They force them to be dependent on Israeli imported goods into their country and other foreign goods imported to their country, which means that they're under the control. It's easier to control you if you are dependent on somebody else for your entire existence. So Jared Kushner's spouting the same things that many of them say with, Gaza could have been this wonderful place, but you guys screwed it up. You guys had all this money. Well, you can have all the money in the world. Where are the leaders of Hamas? They're not even living in Gaza. They're all around. They're everywhere else but Gaza because you can't get anything into Gaza. So even with their billions of dollars, what are they? And yeah, look, all leaders are corrupt. You can't blame the Palestinians. We have corrupt leaders here in the United States. Israel has corrupt leaders. Look at Benjamin Netanyahu. He's facing all kinds of indictments. You've got corruption everywhere in the world. This is not unique to the Gazans. This is not unique to the Palestinians. They're just also experiencing what everybody else is experiencing. But on top of that, they're experiencing a heavy-handed occupation, a murderous occupation at this point. So these billionaires don't even live there. If they had all the money, it doesn't matter. You can't get the imports in anyway. All right, let's move on to Emmanuel Macron. Because Emmanuel Macron, speaking of warmongers, Emmanuel Macron and NATO might be trying to reel us into Ukraine. So Ukraine is obviously very desperate. Ukraine has not been able to get the funding that they need. The Irish Prime Minister, great on Palestine, bad on Ukraine. When he was visiting Biden, he was talking to him about the importance of helping Ukraine, the importance of doing what we need to do, everything that we need to do for Ukraine. Ireland has taken in more Ukrainian refugees than any other country per capita. So you've got Ireland begging Joe Biden, but you got France stepping up and saying, listen, we'll send troops. Now, they want to send troops in to actually fight Russia. Many of the French are freaking out about this, thinking, what in the world? We don't want to go into an actual hot war with Russia. In fact, many NATO member states are saying, what are you talking about? This is not a good idea. We don't want to actually, we're fine funding it. We don't want to go into an actual hot war with Russia. That would be a disaster. But Emmanuel Macron is deciding that maybe he would want to send a couple thousand troops into Ukraine and actually battle them out with Russia. Now, Russia reports that France is already preparing these troops. France is not confirming that they're preparing troops, but they are confirming that they're not against it. So here's the story. Emmanuel Macron says, this is from CNBC, we cannot exclude options, he said. The security of Europe and the security of the French people is at stake here, he says. Okay, so he's thinking that, going into the whole thing, and same thing with the Irish Prime Minister, is if Russia takes Ukraine, then Russia's going to continue expanding and they're going to get us all. That's what they're thinking. So they want to stop Russia at Ukraine. There is some logic in that. If there was, there's logic in that, for any conflict, sure. But in this particular conflict, Russia has made it clear it's not intending to go further than, taking some parts of Ukraine and dismantling the current Ukrainian government. And it's got very personal and direct objectives with Ukraine specifically. Everyone else, Russia kind of says, look, you're not my brother. This is my brother. This is my family. This is an inter-family issue. I'm working it out with my family. You're not my family. I don't care about you. So, but all these others, like Emmanuel Macron and the Irish Prime Minister, and there's a few others around, like Poland or whatever, they're saying, we don't believe you. We don't believe you. We think you're after us too. So they're going to send in troops. The problem with this, obviously, is if French troops start getting killed by the Russians inside of Ukraine, what does that mean for NATO? So the NATO Article 5, though, doesn't trigger unless you yourself are being, supposedly, but of course they always bend the meanings. So what is this? Are we going to end up in a war because they bent the meanings of Article 5? Let's see if we can find Article 5, the text for NATO. Let's see if we could bend these words ourselves. Article 5 provides that if a NATO ally is the victim of an armed attack, each and every other member of the alliance will consider this act of violence as an armed attack against all members and will take the actions it deems necessary to assist the ally attacked. Okay, so that can be bent. So there's a possibility that if France goes and sends 2,000 troops into Ukraine and that those troops are then killed by Russians, there is a chance that the language can be bent to mean that they're attacked and that we all need to join in on the war. So France could be potentially baiting us into this war. That would be a disaster. Why is France doing this? Now, France, they don't jump into wars very often, actually. The people in France are They're a fiery bunch. They're the ones who protest, and when they protest, they really protest. I mean, they burn things. They burn things to the ground. They're the best protesters in the world, the French. They can't ever go to war, and France doesn't ever send troops in when they're fighting Arabs. And there's a reason for that, because France has a very heavy Arab population after colonizing northern Africa. So they have a lot of Algerians, they have a lot of Moroccans, they have a lot of Algerians, though. So they have a lot of Arabs, and they're not so keen on going after other Arabs. But this is not that. These are Russians. So, hey, have at it, right? That's what the French are kind of thinking. They usually shy away from this type of thing, but in this instance, they're just going full on warmonger. So we'll see where this leads. By the way, did you hear about that? Candace Owens has been going absolutely hard on Brigitte Macron. Let me just show you a picture of Brigitte. So Brigitte Macron is Emmanuel Macron's much, much, much older wife. In fact, she started dating Emmanuel, or she met Emmanuel Macron. I mean, it's kind of like depends on the timeline. When he was like 14, 15, or 16, and she was in her late 30s, she was his teacher. So it was very much like a Mary Kay Letourneau situation with Emmanuel Macron, but they also, same sort of Mary Kay Letourneau situation. They fell in love, they got married. Same thing with her, same thing with Brigitte Macron. Well, Candace Owens is on this tear, and she believes that Brigitte Macron is a man and that this has been covered up and by the press and by the establishment, that they've completely covered up the fact that Brigitte Macron. So she's gone on, here's her tweet about this. She did an episode on it saying, this is a bombshell. This is going to shake up France. It won't, by the way. The French don't care. But she says, this episode is blowing up, so I just want to say, after looking into this, I would stake my entire professional reputation on the fact that Brigitte Macron is, in fact, a man. Any journalist or publication that is trying to dismiss this plausibility is immediately identifiable as establishment. I've never seen anything like this in my life. The implications here are terrifying. No, they're not. They're not terrifying, Candace, because you don't know the French. If you knew the French, you'd know this is not terrifying. They do not care. The French don't care. Maybe Brigitte Macron is a man. The thing that French would care about is they'd be like, well, why weren't you just honest about it from the beginning? To them, they would feel mad that this was covered up. They don't care if she's a man. The French are just, the French, they have presidents that have mistresses and affairs, and it is not a scandal in France. They don't care. They just say, They look at us here in the United States when we get all up in arms over like Monica Lewinsky and Bill Clinton. They were like, what are you guys all, who cares? The French do not care. So if Brigitte Macron is a man, which maybe she is, and I haven't looked into it, I don't care. I just thought this was funny. And some people are in this country are going on and on thinking like, oh, this is going to shake up everything, and this is the biggest scandal on earth, and this is going to tear down French politics. And the French are like, when you read comments from French, I lived in France for a bit. I do speak a bit of French and read a bit of French. And when you read the comments from French people, they're like, we've known about this for years. Nobody cares. They don't care. But it's just a little side note. It's just kind of funny. All right, guys, we're going to move on with the show, but it looks like NATO is strengthening. Trump is still going to strengthen NATO. Emmanuel Macron is going to potentially put NATO at risk. Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, is showcasing that he's a giant Zionist who has very pro-radical Israel ideas. I bring that up only because that's Trump's son-in-law. If Trump gets back into office, I don't think we're going to see any change in really any change at all when it comes to Israel. In fact, Trump said that those who are against Israel are, hate. The Jews that are against Israel, basically called them self-hating Jews. So I don't think we're going to see, unfortunately, with the second term of Trump, any real major difference between him and Joe Biden. That's the point. Hey guys, be sure to like, share, and subscribe if you like this segment. Now, you might be wondering, this seems like it's part of a bigger show. You're right, it is. The full show is at KimIversonShow.com. So what you're watching is just a clip. And if you want to get the full experience, then you got to go to KimIversonShow.com. The show airs Monday through Friday, 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern at KimIversonShow.com. That is where you can watch the full show. Here, you just get clips. So click on the link down below, go to the full show, enjoy. Otherwise, I'll see you next time right here. And be sure, once again, like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.